John Butler is officially out as the Nebraska defensive coordinator, as most of you probably have seen by now. So we're going to dive
Breaking
into
news, actually.
Yeah, breaking. Yeah, we're going to dive into a few of the guys the names that are floating around. And as we saw from previous coaching cycles, every name floating around, it could be just completely out of left field. You know, everybody's going to say they know this, that, and the third. We're going to talk about some of the guys that we're hearing of, and some of the guys we think might be a good fit. So, yeah, let's go ahead and let's just kind of start there. So first things first, John Butler's defense, was just kind of abysmal all season. Like we talked about, it was really one of those things where you just, if you would have seen maybe a little bit of progression over the course of the season, then you could speak to something. But literally, he left nothing to speak to. It's almost like the run defense got worse. I mean, by nature of the schedule, we kind of ran into kind of some buzzsaws of running backs and running teams at the end of the schedule, but you got to do what you got to do to prepare for that. And the coaching wasn't there, and it just simply wasn't good enough. In every account, even just the defense looked uninspired. It looked flat, and it just felt like Nebraska couldn't do anything successfully. And even the hallmark pass defense that was, good yardage wise throughout the season, it's not one of those defenses like pass defenses that I really felt, I don't know about you, but I didn't really feel like it was lockdown. You know what I'm saying? When you have like a real lockdown pass defense, you kind of feel like that confidence in it. I didn't have that. Like, I felt like it was still very susceptible to getting beat.
I'm glad you said that, because that was more towards the latter part of the season where I was getting really frustrated with the elite pass defense narrative. Just for the sake of our discussion here, Iowa completed 9 passes, 9 of 16, pretty solid, right? But it's not even about how many they completed. It's about what they did with those completions, which was for 166 yards, which, quick math here, is 18.4 yards per completion. Not very good. And the week prior against Penn State, they were 11 of 12, and you gave up 14 yards per completion. And it wasn't even just that. That was just the tip of the iceberg. Guys were running wide open, busted coverages left and right. And part of that, too, was your pass rush was just non-existent for the duration of the year. Your top sack getter had 2.5 sacks. You can't have that. You can't give quarterbacks 4, 5, 6 seconds to throw the ball. They're going to find the pockets in the zones. They're going to find somebody open. So it was just a fluke stat, if you will, that we had this top. What was he end up being? Top 25 overall?
Something like that.
Defense. Yeah. Doesn't really matter to me when you're giving up, 18 yards per completion and 6 yards per carry, which I think that's what they ended the year at. Was at 5, maybe 5.5 yards per carry, which was over 2 yards per carry more than last year under Tony White. I mean, it was just abysmal.
Yeah, didn't feel locked down at all, and I didn't feel confident when a quarterback would drop back to pass. I still didn't feel confident, and then just the sacks in general. Getting pressure is one thing, but then completing a sack is another. And anytime we were actually able to generate pressure, it just seemed like we lacked the fundamentals to really be able to complete the sacks and complete the plays, and extended plays really, really killed us this year. Across the board, week in and week out, by just letting quarterbacks create with their legs. And if you give, them opportunities to do that and extend plays, they're going to. And then you put your defensive backs on an island, you end up drawing, the defense gets penalties and stuff like that. So just a lot of uninspired defensive play throughout the season. So let's go ahead and dive into some of the guys that we're kind of hearing or looking at for the defensive coordinator spot. And you got some names on your end. So go ahead. If you want to start from whoever you got at the top of your list, let's go ahead and take it down the list.
Yeah. The top of my list is Brent Pry, former Virginia Tech head coach, previously the defensive coordinator under James Franklin at Penn State from 2016 to 2021. He was a linebacker coach there as well from 2014 to 2015. Previous Power 5 experiences in the SEC as well at Vanderbilt from 2011 to 2013. So a lot of time with James Franklin. because I believe that was when he was at Vanderbilt too, possibly. But here's the reason why he's a good fit at Nebraska. Top 25 defense in 8 of his 11 seasons as a defensive coordinator. At Penn State, his defenses were third during his tenure, that same span. They were third in QB hurries, fourth in total pressures, top 5 in sacks nationally, top 10 in TFL rate, which Nebraska was a disaster at in both categories that we just talked about, and top 10 in rush defense during his tenure. In 2019 alone, top 10 in scoring defense, number 1 in yards per carry allowed at 2.6 yards per carry, which we just said Nebraska was over 5. They're number 1 in rush yards per game allowed at 95. They led the nation in forced fumbles. They were 7th nationally in sacks. And that 2019 team, that defense, had 10 all Big Ten selections. In 2018, top 20 nationally in pass efficiency, red zone defense, which Nebraska was borderline last, if I'm not mistaken. Their touchdown rate in the red zone was 134th nationally this year. Teams converted a touchdown at 77% rate against Nebraska in the red zone, which is disgusting. Yards per play, top 20. Third down defense, top 20. These are all things Nebraska struggled with. Yeah. He's excelled throughout his entire career as a DC.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things is overcoming really where Nebraska is struggling in the deficits these past couple seasons in general. Because he's a guy who, like you talked about, has developed a lot of guys. I think saw Micah Parsons was on one of his defenses. Yeah. So there you go right there. But runs a base, I think 4.3, but can integrate the 3.35. But I think he's just one of those guys that when you talk about just solid, when you look at a guy who's been stop after stop after stop and been able to be successful everywhere he's gone, it just speaks to a guy who has a defensive discipline and a defense that is structured, and he knows how to take his talent and kind of mold that to what, because everywhere he's been multiple different places, the Sun Belt, he's been, Georgia Southern, Old Dominion, Penn State, he's been all of these places and always been successful on the defensive side of the football. And so some of those guys that, are just built to be defensive coordinators and like you talked about, just kind of a lot of the areas solves a lot of the issues that Nebraska has with the gap responsibilities being an issue. Something as simple as being able to just come down and fill your gap. Because Nebraska, again, it's not one of those things where I feel like we lack talent in a lot of areas. Very talented team. We lacked the guys up front, but when you can counteract that with a lot of your talent if you know how to use them properly. And it just seemed like they weren't being used properly. This is the type of guy that you bring in to be able to identify talent, put them where they need to be, and be able to run them and develop them the way they're supposed to and to fit his system, instead of, I think it's less so John Butler came in and was trying to, I don't want to say in over his head, trying to figure out how to kind of marry all of this together. Mm-hmm. But it was really hard for him to come from the NFL and have no experience with this 3.35 and then all of a sudden have to learn it and figure it out. You bring in a guy like this, he has all that experience needed to be able to come in and just plug and play, but also the ability to identify talent as he's shown throughout his career.
Next on our list, another former head coach. Now, someone in the chat's already leaked my number 1 option, but he's going to be our surprise guy for last. But the next guy, Justin Wilcox, fired as Cal's head coach. He was there for quite a while, 2017 to 2025. 11 years as a Power 5 defensive coordinator, Boise State, Tennessee, Washington, USC, and Wisconsin, which I do like because that was when that was a Big Ten experience for him. So I like that with both the first 2 guys. Big Ten experience, played a lot of the teams we're playing, right? They know how to win in this environment. Some of his resume highlights, I guess, as a defensive coordinator at USC from 2014 to 2015, they're top 20 nationally in turnover margin, red zone defense, and third down defense. They led the Pac-12 in third down defensive TDs with 5 touchdowns. At Washington, this was a really big project for him when he came to Washington in 2012. Their defense was ranked 105th or worse in almost every single statistical category the year prior. His first year, they were a top 40 unit in almost every single statistical category, and that was in his first year. By 2013, they were 29th in scoring defense, 10th in pass efficiency defense, 41st in sacks. Third nationally with 41 sacks for the year. And then at Boise State, he was there for those great runs they had from 2009 and 2008 as well. I don't need to go into a ton of those stats because Boise, we know, was dominating. But really, I like his experience at Power 4 level. And when he was at Wisconsin as well. He was only there 1 year, but they went 11-2, if I'm not mistaken. They went to the Rose Bowl and lost to Oregon, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So he's a guy I think is a legitimate option. But these names too, we talked about before we jumped on. Oregon's DC is now the head coach at Cal, or he's expected to take that job. So that might mess with these things a little bit because I believe Justin Wilcox is from Oregon.
Yeah, and kind of another guy again, kind of a base 4-3, which kind of get into that. I mean, we kind of have the personnel there needed because you kind of run into the 3-3-5 is a variation of a 4-3, like a 4-3, 4-2-5 style. But like the thing about it is, again, just another guy that you talked about has come into multiple places and improved them immediately. 11-3. You talked about in his time with Wisconsin, under 15 points per game he gave up there, but very versatile defensively. He brings in a lot of nickel packages. Cal 18th in pass efficiency defensively. I don't know if you pointed that out or not. I can't remember. And good at getting off the field on third down. So again, just we need a lot of these guys that come in and just correct things quickly. And it can't be one of those things where it's a guy who's going to have to come in and just get his personnel in there and stuff like that. We need to have somebody who's been proven to go in there, turn the place around, has Big Ten experience, hopefully has Big Ten experience. And I actually like Wilcox a lot. I have him very high on my list of people I would like to see. So
my one question, I guess, it goes for Brent Pry too, as Justin Wilcox. I think a big thing here is you have to be able to bring your own staff. I think you can't force this new defensive coordinator to work with the existing staff. I think that was part of our problem. Was Butler didn't get a chance to bring his own guys. Even Tony White didn't get to bring his own guys.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing that has to be negotiated. What, if any, players can they bring with them? Because I don't think it ended bad at Cal, or for Pry's sake, I don't think it ended bad at Virginia Tech. I think they're well liked, well respected. But do they have anybody they can bring with? Because Nebraska has gaps that they have to fill with portal guys. And I think you're hoping your defensive coordinator can bring people with you.
Well, that's interesting because I think when if there is a situation where they are able to bring people over, I think it kind of has to be, the approach that, Cignetti took at Indiana. Like it has to be guys that have proven themselves with production, and you can't bring over a guy and just be like, and I think another thing too, it's Matt Rule just kind of has to take, because at the end of the day, he talks about he's the overseer of the roster decisions. He talked about before with recruiting, they look at some film, they'll all kind of put their thoughts down or rank players or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's his personnel decision, right? My thing there is, will he be able to kind of relinquish enough of that control to where he's like, I don't have to look at these guys. Like, I'm going to trust what these guys bring in. I think if you do hire somebody in year 4 as your defensive coordinator, I'm not sure who. I have to look kind of at their rosters and see what kind of players we're looking at for them to bring in. But I think for you to have somebody to bring in at year 4, it has to be somebody you trust that much to be able to make that decision. 100%.
Yes.
It has to be a guy that you trust to be able to sit here and say, bring in whoever you need to, let me know what you need and we'll get them in here. And because until you give somebody full control, it's always going to be, the finger's always going to be pointed at you again. Cause you end up becoming the common denominator at a certain point, so if he wants to be able to sit here and say, we brought this guy and it didn't work. Well, let him do what he does. It's kind of like when Bill O'Brien was with the Texans, right? They were like, okay, we're going to give you one last chance at this, but we're making you the general manager, right?
Yep.
So you can't say anything about this, right? You're making the decisions here. If you fail, it's on you, right? And so that's kind of has to be the mindset here. He has to just trust whoever he brings in. He has to trust to that level of I'm giving you full control over this. Again, he needs to be kind of the GM, CEO, whatever, and let this guy be kind of run his side of the